Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome back to another episode of The Sims 4 Real Lore. In this series, we explore destinations from around the world, shrouded in history, mystery, and sometimes a little bit of spookiness. Now, as you can see from the title of today's video, we are examining the ghost town of 𝗪𝗪𝗡, and this town has quite a bit of mystery surrounding its origins and how it ultimately became abandoned. Starting off today's tale, I do want to preface this by saying that I am not very well versed in Arabic, but I will do my best to pronounce these different names for you guys as well. This video will also cover topics regarding the supernatural and paranormal, so please keep that in mind while watching. But looking into 𝗪𝗪𝗡 itself, this is a town located in the country known as the United Arab Emirates, and it is in fact located in the Sharjah territory. Now, this town is located a little bit farther inland and is actually in the middle of a giant desert. There are massive sand dunes everywhere, and it is fairly desolate in appearance. Now, there is a large misconception that the entire town of 𝗪𝗪𝗡 is abandoned, and that is actually not entirely true. In fact, 𝗪𝗪𝗡 has become an increasingly large tourist destination. So you will see different shopping centers, different venues, there is a new hospital that was built, and even a wedding hall there as well. However, there is in fact a smaller abandoned village known as the Shaabiyat Al Ghurayfa, and this was the name provided by the Sharjah Art Foundation. So this settlement is composed of about 12 different houses, with a mosque ending the village as well. And due to the large amounts of sands and sand dunes that have formed there, the local residents do have some very interesting creative names for this village. It is sometimes known as the Buried Village, the Old Town of 𝗪𝗪𝗡, and the Ghost Town of 𝗪𝗪𝗡. Now, the original dates and origins as to why this village was developed is under a lot of speculation and really is a murky area in my research. From a lot of the articles I referenced, the date of construction is somewhere between the 70s and 80s, with a likely date of 1975. Now, the Shaabiyat settlement was established as some sort of housing project that I believe was either funded by the Sharjah Emirate or the overall federal government of the UAE. These homes were actually said to be the settlement of the 𝗪𝗪𝗡𝗞𝗦 tribe. So members of this tribe were very prominent. They were among some of the native peoples living in this area and did in fact inhabit these homes after they were constructed. Now, previously it is said that this native people formerly lived in tents that I assume they constructed, but after this project was completed, it was said that the concrete homes would be a better, more permanent establishment for them to use. Now, traditionally, the 𝗪𝗪𝗡𝗞𝗦 were a very nomadic people. They did travel throughout different parts of this region, but this settlement would again offer them a more permanent residence and hopefully last a longer term. Now, the reasons behind this project are very strange. I couldn't really find a lot of information. Again, I do know that this village was formed for this tribe, but I don't know if there were some sort of reservation, a land grant, some sort of charity work, or if this was an agreement between the tribe and the government themselves. What we do know, however, is that this village was actually abandoned only 10 years later. So by the year of roughly 1985, all of the tribe would then leave this village, and this would be a ghost town for about 40 years. Now, examining the town of Shaabiyat itself, it certainly is a very modern urbex experience. All the buildings themselves are very similar. The houses are all made out of a concrete material and painted in either a white or cream color. There is a little bit of a darker brown or maroon tone on the roofs. And for the buildings themselves, the only building that is quite different is, of course, the mosque. The mosque definitely has more traditional elements. I can see some of the Islamic influences in the architecture, and the building itself is painted in a mixture of white and a very light, almost pastel green. Now, interestingly enough, even though the town has been abandoned for 40 years, the walls of the homes are very much intact. Only walls that surround the courtyard or different yards between each of the individual houses, those walls have in fact crumbled and given way to the forces of the desert. Now, curiously enough, even though we are situated in a desert, a lot of the vegetation within the settlement is still very alive and well. If you reference the photos, you can see lots of trees, lots of bushes, Lots of foliage pretty much everywhere surrounding the homes, and they are very much lush and green. Now, apart from the general architecture of this area, there are some very strange oddities that I really couldn't figure out. If you guys look at the photographs, you'll actually notice that many of the homes do not have doors or windows. The doors have seemingly been removed or eroded, and any former windows there are without glass and without panels. My first instinct was that this could be due to vandalism, but there hasn't been many reports of that occurring here, so that pretty much just leaves me with natural decay. Now, on another curious note, the homes are also devoid of any major amenities. So by amenities, I mean different fixtures throughout the homes. So the bathrooms, for example, would not have toilets, they wouldn't have sinks or showers or baths. And what would be the kitchen areas don't really have any amenities either. So no fridges, no stoves, nothing like that whatsoever. Curiously enough, there are also no signs of plumbing, but we do have evidence of, I guess, what would be circuit breakers or electrical units that are within some of the homes. Now, a certain element about these homes that evokes a lot of mystery and question is the fact that there are personal belongings left in some of the homes. Now, for a majority of these spaces, you will see fairly empty rooms. You'll see some evidence of old bed frames, maybe an old table or a wardrobe. But in some of the spaces, it is said that you'll still find articles of clothing, books, and other similar personal items. So we'll definitely get into that a little later into this video, but again, it's just a very curious thing to point out. The big question surrounding this Shaabiyat essentially is, how did it become abandoned? How did it become abandoned in the first place after 10 years of residence? And that pretty much takes us along two very different journeys. On one side, we have a lot of focus on the climate and natural occurrences in this region. And the word that comes back to us and that many residents use is, of course, the sand. There are immense sand dunes. There is an immense amount of sand that has overtaken this village, and that has been one of the primary reasons that people firmly believe. Now, upon doing a little bit of research in the UAE, it is said that sandstorms and dust storms are very common, and from what I see in videos and footage, they can also be quite deadly and dangerous. So given the location, given that the village itself is located within a desert without a lot of obstruction from either other buildings or other types of foliage or trees, it is likely that sandstorms could have been a major factor as to why the residents left. Now, the sand itself can also be very cumbersome. It is said that even to this day, you will need a four-wheel drive vehicle in order to, I guess, safely traverse this region. Now, apart from the climate, we also look at where this village is situated. And as you can see, it is pretty barren and desolate. It is very far from surrounding villages and infrastructure. And I would believe that some of the amenities and utilities that are supplied to the village are in very low supply. So again, it's another potential reason as to why these Al-Qutbi residents did in fact leave. Now, as a quick follow-up to the abandonment of this village by the Al-Qutbi, I do want to confirm that this did in fact happen. Apparently, the tribe did have contact with the government, and the government did in fact assist the tribe in relocating their establishment. So they did move to a newer development that was farther away from this current ghost town, and apparently, based on reports, they were also compensated for their time there as well. Now, unfortunately, that leads us to our next point, or the other side of the argument. Now, even with this knowledge in mind, there are many local residents who claim that there are supernatural or paranormal forces that potentially drove out the villagers. Now, this is probably very speculative, it's very controversial, but there is a lot of speak of the work of Jinn, potentially dark spirits that could have had a strong hand in why this happened. Now, as a little bit of information about Jinn, the lore and belief of Jinn actually date back several centuries, even before modern-day Islam. Now, collectively, the word Jinn refers to a very diverse range of invisible spirits that also exist on the same earthly plane that we do. Now, unfortunately, we cannot see them, but it is said that they are made of a fire-like substance that does not emit any smoke. Now, despite predating modern-day Islam, the Jinn themselves are now included in the Quran, which is the Islamic Bible. In that sense, they are actually included in the story of creation. It is said that when God, or the higher power, created the beings that would inhabit this world, God created man or mankind, but alongside that, he did create Jinn. Jinn being these different types of spiritual entities. And although these Jinn didn't really procreate in a traditional sense, they did in fact grow and multiply and live alongside people. Now, much like the belief in Japanese yokai, there is a misconception regarding the Jinn themselves. There is a strong belief that Jinn are inherently evil or malevolent beings, but that is absolutely not the case. In fact, many Jinn have said to become friends with humans, offering them help, guidance, and possibly bringing them good fortune as well. Now, there is one tale that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and that is the classic tale of Aladdin. Now, the tale of Aladdin actually emerged in a collection of works known as the 1001 Nights, and these are a collection of tales from both Middle Eastern and Indian culture. These stories appeared roughly in the 9th century, and as you can tell from the story itself, if I'm sure you guys seen many adaptations of Aladdin, we do have a genie or Jinn assisting a young, poor boy with winning the heart of a princess and potentially overcoming a dark sorcerer. Now, interestingly enough, this tale was actually originally set in China, but the Jinn that is pictured in the artwork and in the tale is a very strong reference and correlation to Middle Eastern lore. Now, circling back to the ghost town of Shaabiyat itself, there are some possible connections between Jinn and this particular ghost town. Upon looking at many different articles, there was one darker Jinn that kept coming up in my research, and this Jinn was known as the al-Duay. And this is a female Jinn noted for having donkey hooves, cat eyes, and blades for hands. So she is definitely a terrifying spirit. She is potentially very dangerous to humans. But fortunately for us, we haven't had any particular instances. We haven't had any reports, sightings, or evidence of her being there. But for some reason, this particular spirit has been heavily part of the lore of the Shaabiyat. Now, apart from this rather spooky Jinn, the belief in Jinn itself is actually very quintessential to the Al-Qutbi culture. The Al-Qutbis are actually a larger group known as the Bedouin. The Bedouins were, like I said, a larger group of people who lived very nomadically and have been in existence since 6000 BCE. The word actually is Arabic and means desert dweller, and this was a people that sustained their life through agriculture, trade, and the transport of goods via caravans. So, like I said, they were very nomadic people. They would definitely move around this region quite often, and they existed in different tribal clans. And as a result, being that they are a very ancient people, they also held a very strong ancient belief in the powers of Jinn and the spirits within our world. Now, building upon the belief of Jinn, it is also believed that Jinn have the possibility to shapeshift. They can take the form of humans, they can take the form of animals, they can even take the form of different inanimate objects and use them as a vessel. So that could be rocks, that could be trees, even the wind and sand. So when I circle back to the argument that nature was pretty much the main reason as to why the Al-Qutbi tribe left, it is said that perhaps there was a supernatural influence on the natural environment itself. Now, on a more mysterious note, it is said that Jinn are also very attached to ruins, and even though the Shaabiyat was not abandoned by any means back in the years of 1975 through 1985, it certainly is in a very derelict state today. So I can certainly see how this is fueling a lot of the folklore and different beliefs regarding the village itself. On another interesting note, if we do take into consideration the fact that Jinn can in fact shapeshift into animals, we do have another potential threat, and that is actually the threat of scorpions. It is reported that there are many scorpions or trails of scorpions that are within this village settlement that have been reported or found by other tourists, and it is possible that there is a belief that Jinn have shapeshifted into these beings. And of course, being how scary and venomous they are, they could have been a potential threat. Like I said, the Jinn could have also had influence over the climate, if we are going down the route of Jinns having influence over natural elements and taking the form of natural elements. But if we look at a lot of the research or a lot of the investigations today, it is very hard to pinpoint any sign of supernatural or paranormal activity. From the videos I've watched of people exploring these ruins, there really hasn't been any strange occurrences, and of the very tiny handful where people reported sightings, there were definitely a lot of credibility issues with the film and the different occurrences that were supposedly captured on video. Now, even with a lack of hard evidence regarding paranormal and supernatural activity, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this small ghost town. Now, it got so out of hand, in fact, that the Sharjah Art Foundation actually stepped in. And as an effort to sort of demystify the small town and its origin, they actually created a short film by the name of Al-Hubat, which is also known as The Landing. This film was released in 2019 and it was directed by 𝗪𝗓𝗓𝗓, and unfortunately it no longer is available. I do believe it was on the Mubi platform, but overall this video does take place in the Shaabiyat and offers a lot of interesting artistic shots and experiences throughout the different structures. In one scene, there is a really cool shot of a helicopter that descends upon the village, and you can see the winds of the blades kind of dispersing the sands everywhere. So it's quite an interesting experience, and I definitely encourage you to at least look at the trailer or different clips to get an idea of how the film plays out. Looking at the abandoned Shaabiyat of Al-Madam today, it has now become a very popular tourist destination. Even despite a lot of the mystery and history and a lot of the speculation surrounding this site, it has only added to the fuel that drives a lot of people here exploring these interesting, somewhat modern ruins. It is said that you can actually pay a taxi to drive to this location, even though it's not really on their route, but there are also new safari tours that actually take you through the village itself. Like I said, the sand and the sand dunes are quite demanding, so you will likely need a four-wheel drive vehicle. I imagine a Jeep or a really good SUV could do the trick. And in terms of the status of the site itself, at this time there has not been any plans for the UAE government to refurbish it, to renovate this property. And at the same time, there hasn't really been any measures to protect this site either. Thankfully, there have been very minimal signs of vandalism, and despite the increasingly large sand dunes that are taking over the settlement, you can still very well explore it. It is said that there are a lot of hidden treasures that are still left intact. I know for one, there is a mural in one of the homes. One of the homes also features some very decorative elements on the wall and the columns that still exist to this day. And the mosque itself, to my knowledge, is still very accessible as well. Regardless of whether you believe in the more natural or climate-based forces as the main reason for abandonment, or even the work of some supernatural or paranormal beings, it is very clear that this town is not really going anywhere anytime soon. It definitely is regarded as the hidden gem of the UAE, and like I said, is just becoming more and more popular with time as more explorers come to visit it. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on the ghost town of Al-Madam. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the lore and some of the mysteries surrounding this location, and of course enjoyed the build itself. The build was a little tricky. I did have to truncate a lot of areas. You guys can see that there were a ton of smaller buildings, but I could only fit so much on this one lot. But we do have the 12 original homes and the mosque. I also attempted to recreate a lot of the rooms, which I did include in different pictures throughout the video, and hopefully I did capture that essence for you guys. On that note, I'll leave you guys with some finishing cinematics, just showing a final look at the different areas of the lot, along with the different lot specs. This of course is a no CC, no mod limited pack build that you guys can download and use from the Sims 4 gallery. And with that, this has been towniesimbuilds signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.